All right, so today we're learning about the quadratic formula. We learned a little song that we will sing right now that you can practice. This is 10-4. Very important lesson. Okay, so we are starting with, you guys want to help me sing? 1, 2, 3. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that song goes along with Pop Goes the Weasel. I don't care how you learn it. I just want you to learn it, and you need to use it for tonight's homework. When you're doing the problems tonight and you're solving for using the quadratic formula, I want you to write the formula every time tonight. So for every problem, you write it and then you substitute in. It's really quite easy. It's the easiest of all the methods on how to solve a quadratic equation. Step 1, you identify your A, your B, and your C. So what is my A, B, and C in this equation? Shaylin?
Your A is 2, your B is 5, and your C is 10.
Perfect. And so then I just start to substitute in. I say negative 5 goes for the B, plus or minus 5 squared for the B squared, minus 4 times 2 times negative 3, all over 2A. And then we simplify. We use our order of operations. Now, a lot of kids make mistakes inside that square root because they say that the square root of 25, they'll do something like this. Okay? They'll do something like this and do 25 minus 4 first. But that is subtracting before we multiply. So that is actually wrong. We actually have to, we square 5 and then we take this entire chunk and have to multiply it as a unit. What does that unit multiply to? Yes, Ryan? Positive 24. So it's really 25 plus 24, not 25 minus 4. And then I add it up. 25 plus 24 is 49. And then if we can root it, we root it. It's looking like a very friendly, pretty number. Square root of 49 is what? 7. So it's negative 5 plus or minus 7 over 4. Negative 7 plus 7 is negative 2 over 4, which reduces to a half. And negative 7 minus 7 is negative 12 over 4, which reduces to 3. And these are my two solutions. Yes?
Where did you get negative 7 minus 7 from?
Right here. I didn't get negative 7 minus 7. I got negative 5 minus 7.
Oh, you see.
Okay? It's negative 5 minus 7. Yes?
So on problems like this, I get confused order on B.
No, because what we've just found is when we have, remember, when you set y to 0, what are you finding? Your x-intercepts, right? So what this is that you found is your roots or your x-intercepts and at positive 1/2 of where the parabola goes through. Okay? This is 1/2 comma 0, and this is negative 3. When we write it as a solution to the quadratic, we put it in braces, but if you're trying to identify the roots, we use the point. Negative 3 comma 0. 1/2 comma 0. Remember, when we set y to 0, we find the x-intercepts. When we set x to 0, we find the y-intercept. Okay? Questions? All right, let's move on. So this next part, I'm definitely going to quiz you on. It will take a long time the first time you do it, but the more you do it, it should end up taking you only 2 minutes. So, and I'm going to give you a quiz with these directions. That's it. So you are going to complete the square and simplify. So what do I do first to complete the square, Hershey?
Subtract C.
Subtract C from both sides. And you should be writing down every step. Next step, what are we doing? Somebody else. Torres?
Divide bx by 2.
Nope. Before that. Shaylin?
Divide by a.
Divide all terms by a. Get rid of that lead coefficient. So now I've got x squared plus b over a times the quantity of x equals negative c over a. Now, Ryan, what would I do next?
We divide that by 2.
What am I dividing by 2?
B over a.
b over a, we have to divide it by 2. Now, isn't that the same thing as this? Irene's method is to do outside over inside. Outside over inside. So b over 2a. Or what this really means is b over a divided by 2, right? Isn't that the same thing as b over a? We don't divide fractions, we multiply by the reciprocal. So it's b over 2a. So I don't care what way you do it, but that's what it becomes. And then what do I do with that? What am I doing with that, Ryan? And then we have to square it. So what does it become? Nomi, what does it become? b over 2a squared, what does it become? Sierra?
B squared over 4a squared.
Over 4a squared. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording for a minute. Okay, so my question is, what do we do next? Remember, we take that b over a, divide it by 2. We don't divide fractions, we multiply by the reciprocal. So instead of dividing by 2, we're going to multiply by 1/2, and we square it. And that then becomes my c. So I'm adding the c to both sides. Now, what do I do with this left side? What am I doing, Andrea?
Since it's a perfect square polynomial, it becomes x plus b over 2a.
b over 2a. What's this called, what you just did?
It's called it's perfect factoring.
Factoring. We're factoring it. And on the other side, look what I'm going to do. I want you to write it like this. I'm just going to switch this term over here and this over here. Look what I'm going to do. b squared over 4a squared plus c over a. Minus c over a. It's a negative. So I'm just moving them around. Are you guys good with that? Okay. All I did, Ethan, was I moved this whole thing here and this whole thing here.
Oh,
Okay? Now, how do I add and subtract fractions? What's the golden rule, Preston?
Has to have the same denominator.
And so what do I need to do over here to make it have the same denominator?
You multiply 4a on the numerator and the denominator.
So I have to multiply by a fancy one of 4a over 4a to the minus c over a. Okay? Okay, are you with me? And we have that already factored. Okay? Now what I have here is b squared over 4a squared and 4ac squared over 4a squared. Now, can't we just write this all over the same denominator? One line? Are you with me?
Yes.
And what would be my next step on the left side? What do I do when I get my quadratic alone?
you find the square root.
We root both sides. So I'm going to root this side, and I'm going to root this side. Oh, they just made it single. So now we're going to take the square root of both sides. Are you guys with me? Okay. Next step. Next step. What is the square root of this quantity on the left? Shaylin?
Square root is 8x plus b over 2a.
Close. What are we missing?
The absolute value. Oh.
The absolute value of x plus b over 2a. And now look what I'm doing here. I'm just separating. I'm separating the numerator and the denominator. Remember, if it's all under the same radical, it means the numerator is a radical and the denominator. And I'm doing that because, is the numerator a perfect square?
No.
B squared is a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square, but A and C are not. So it's going to stay under the radical. But look at that denominator. Is that a perfect square?
Yes.
What does it become?
2a.
And then, how do I lose this absolute value? Yes?
You just say x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a.
Yep. I'm adding the plus and minus, and I'm taking the root of that. We are nearly done. Jacob, what do you think would happen next?
You would subtract b over 2a on each side.
Yep. And notice, this is owned by this piece here. So that minus b over 2a is going to go before the plus or minus.
Did you just get the formula?
Yes.
So we are very close. Is there any other way I can simplify this, Hershey?
Put everything over 2a instead of just...
Yeah, we don't need it. And where are we now?
Quadratic formula.
At the quadratic formula. Yes, we are. So what you have just done is called deriving the quadratic formula by completing the square. Okay? Now, it seems very complex. Nomi, I'm going to tell you the secret. You do it once successfully, and then you practice it a couple times, and it will take you 2 minutes. So I'm going to give you a quiz on this, and I'm only going to give you complete the square with ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. You will need to practice this at home this week. Am I clear? Yes.
Well, when is this quiz?
Wednesday or Thursday.
Oh.
Okay, we don't have time for this. Is everybody clear on this? Yes.
Just where? Okay.
We got a ton more to do.
Sorry. Would you factor the inside of x plus b over 2a? How do you get the middle term?
Here?
B over a. Right there. How do you get that middle term? The b over a times x. How does that equal to x plus b over 2a?
Well, remember, with any perfect square trinomial, what you're forgetting is that, what you are forgetting is when you have like x squared plus 6x plus 9, if I wanted to factor that, what's the square root of this? X. What's the square root of this?
3.
Plus 3. We know it's already in square number. When you multiply them together and double it, it equals that.
Yeah, but I'm confused on that specific. Like, how did they get the middle term from that?
Don't worry about it. We're still, how do we get the middle term?
Yeah, how do you get the b over ax from x plus b?
Because you have this. We divided by a. So that goes here. What we were missing was this. So once I have this whole thing, what's the square root of this? What's the square root of this? Okay? All right, I need to move on. Okay, so when using this, again, you're always going to write your quadratic formula. What's my a, my b, my c? A is 3, my b is -4, my c is -1. I had a couple kids that got this wrong because they didn't list, and they left out negatives. Okay? Now, when you substitute in, I just substitute in negative b, negative b. Notice I write down both negatives. That will remind me it's a positive. Plus or minus -4 squared minus 4 times a times c, which is 3 times -1, all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 3. And now we are what does this simplify to? Irene?
This simplifies to 16 plus or minus 16 plus 12.
Plus 12
All over 6.
all over 6. Because negative 4 times 3 is 12 times negative 1. Remember, this chunk right here is all taken as 1. Hershey, are you with me?
Yeah, no, what I got.
So it should be plus 12, which equals what? Can I take the square root of 16 and the square root of 12?
No.
No. We got to simplify inside. It's the square root of 28. Now what? Yes.
Simplify the square root of 28.
Which is?
2 rad 7.
Because there's a 4 in there. It's 4 times 7. So the square root of 4 is 2. 2 rad 7 over 6. Now, we can simplify this first by, notice, I have 3 terms here. 1, 2, and 3. If I have a common factor in all 3, I can simplify it out. I can cross cancel. What can I divide out of all 3 terms? 2. 2 out of 4 is 2. 2 out of 2 is 1. I don't need to write it, so I'm just left with rad 7. And 2 out of 6 is 3. If you were left with something like this, you cannot divide 2 out of all 3 terms. This really means 4 out of 6 plus or minus rad 7 over 6. Do you understand? You can only do that piece. Yes?
So at the top, you can't do 4 plus 2 rad 6 rad 7 over 6. I mean, if you just add 4 and then 2.
Or 2 rad 2.
Don't add 4 to 2. This is a whole term.
Okay. Just
You can't do that. No, that's adding before multiplication. She was wanting to do 4 plus 2 before you do 2 rad 7. 2 rad 7 is a whole term. So it's 4 plus that whole quantity. That was a good question. Sorry. Don't worry about that. We didn't. And now, when it says round to the nearest tenth, the square root of 7 is between square root of 4 and the square root of 9, which roots to 2 and 3. It's a little more than halfway because it's square root of 5, 6, 7, 8. It's just beyond. So I would say it's just beyond 2.5, 2.6. So this really means 2 plus 2.6 divided by 3 and 2 minus 2.6 divided by 3. Are you clear on that?
So you want to write both?
Okay, and then you have to simplify it. Divide it out. 2 plus 2.3, oh my gosh, is 4.6 divided by 3. And this is, hold on, this is 2 minus, right, we said 2.6. So it would be 0.6 divided by 3, and it is, when you divide it, I'm not going to show you how to divide a decimal, because that's something you should know how to do. You should get these 2 answers, or close. When I divided it, I got 1.53. It's slightly off. Notice it's about. Now, in some problems, they're going to ask you to estimate. This is what you do. In others, you're going to reduce like I showed you how to reduce. A lot of them are reduced. Now, I need to move on and show you how to do the discriminant. Okay, if you do not have a trinomial, set it all equal to 0. What if you just have a binomial? What would you use for C?
0.
0. But if this is over here, move it over and then create the trinomial. Does that make
Attention all
sense?
teachers, there is a UTLA meeting going on right now in room 20.
Okay, now, I'm just going to skip through this. The discriminant. The discriminant is the piece inside there. Okay? Now, what that does is it tells us how many roots you have when you are when you get your x's, how many x-intercepts you'll have. Okay? So on the graph. So, if this number is a positive number, greater than 0, it means you have 2 roots. right? Because if I'm doing, let's say I had the square root of 4, isn't it saying plus or minus 4? That's going to be plus 2 and minus 2. It means you're going to have 2 answers. Are you with me? So if this number is positive, even if it's plus 33, it's going to be plus square root of 33 minus square root of 33. You're going to have 2 answers. It means you have 2 roots like this. Is this clear?
Yes.
If it equals 0, greater than 0, it's going to be 2 real roots. If it equals 0, what's the square root of 0?
0.
When you do plus or minus 0, how many answers are there going to be? 1. So this is 1 real root. This kind of situation is, look at my board here. Right here. What kind of problem is that? That's when you get 0 equals x minus 3, x minus 3. What's your solution? 3. There's only 1 3. It's a perfect square trinomials. They sit on the x-axis. Perfect square trinomials sit on the x-axis at 1 point. So when you get 0, it means 1 point. What kind of problem is that? Has to be only one kind. Perfect square trinomial. Okay, the last one. B squared minus 4ac is less than. That means it's a negative. The discriminant, everybody say discriminant, is a negative. What, can we take the square root of a negative?
No.
No. In that situation, your parabola is above or below the x-axis like this right here. I'm realizing I'm showing here. So it's in the air. It's never crossing the x-axis. Does that make sense? When you have the square root of a negative, we're going to say no solution. We can graph it. It's just right up here. Or it's down here. Okay, is that clear? Now let me show you how they answer this. Determine the number of roots for the quadratic. They're going to ask number of roots. Does that mean you got to use the whole quadratic formula?
No.
They didn't ask for what is x. They said how many. So we find our a, our b, our c. We plug it into the discriminant. B squared minus 4ac. How many roots does this mean we have? No, it doesn't.
Actually,
The value of the discriminant. You're not understanding what I'm saying.
2.
He's coming. Okay. What is the value of the discriminant? No, this is the value, but what does that mean when the value of the discriminant equals 1? 2 roots. Okay, do you understand? Sorry, who said no? Okay, this means, one more time, come back here. When your discriminant is equal to a number greater than 0, 1, 5, 100, it means you have 2 roots. It crosses the x-axis. When it equals 0, you have no roots. When it equals less than 0 and negative, so in this case, the value is 1. So how many roots? 2 roots. Okay? So when you have something like this, how many roots?
None.
None. When the value of the discriminant is negative, this is what's under the radical. It's going to be 0 roots. And when it's equal to 0, how many roots? Look at how else they wrote it. Tell whether the vertex lies above, below, or on the x-axis. If it's above, first of all, does this open up or down?
Up.
Because it's positive. And then find, it's going like this. When the value is negative, it means it's up above the x-axis. Okay? When the value, this one opens down because it's negative, and when I find my discriminant, it's a positive number. It's crossing the x-axis twice. Okay. Now, one more thing. They could give you the graph. They could give you the graphs. Are you with me?
Attention all teachers. There's a UTLA meeting happening right now in room 24.
What's the easiest
Please,
graph
all
to match?
teachers, UTLA meeting in room 24. Thank you.
No.
No?
Yes.
X squared?
What?
X squared?
No. Graph C. No. Wait, which one did you say?
A.
A, yes. Why? Why?
Because there's only one root.
One root, so which one does it go with?
So I have to think.
Which one's a perfect square trinomial?
B.
What multiplies to 1 and adds to -2? This is it right here. So if you find your perfect square trinomial, that's it. Then for these, we just plug in our discriminant. When it's -7, it means no real roots, so it's got to go with this one. When you plug in the other, it's a positive number, so it means it's got to go with this one. Okay, sorry guys.